Welcome to the Westeros.org review for episode 5, The Door. And, well, this is a big one. This is the first really big one this season, I would say. And there are definitely book spoilers galore. Can't say precisely what exactly, how close it's going to be to what will happen in the books eventually. But if you've been trying to avoid having some significant mysteries, both of the past and the present, spoiled for you, this is probably not the episode that you want to watch of the show, and you probably don't want to watch this discussion as by the end I will be trying to go into detail what I think about the spoilers and what they mean for the books. Let's start off with the Wall storyline for this week. We now find out as Sansa gets a letter that Littlefinger has teleported all the way to the Wall after first teleporting the Knights of the Vale to Moat Cailin, and he's now there to offer his apologies and his assistance to Sansa. The exchange between them is quite strong and emotional. The acting there is very good. From a plot point of view, I really don't like the fact that they then have Littlefinger trying to sort of sow some discord between Sansa and Jon when she says, no, she has an army already. She doesn't need him. Well, it's your brother's army, your half-brother's army. It feels unnecessary. And then, of course, Sansa seems to fall into this trap immediately, because when she goes on to have the scene where Jon and Davos and Tormund are discussing what forces they have available, she hides who she found out from that the Blackfish has gathered the Tully forces, and she also does not mention the Knights of the Vale at all. Brienne is suspicious of this and points it out when Sansa wants to send her south to deal with the Blackfish. And do you really trust these people around you? And do you actually really trust Jon even? So I don't know. I don't quite like where they're going with that. It seems like another sort of false tension and an idea that to have Sansa be strong and independent, somehow she can't really fully out collaborate with Jon. The scene with them going through what forces they have available also underscores again what an awkward position that Davos is in, having him. He literally has to say that, I'm not a northerner, I don't really know anything about the north, but here I am still sort of giving advice because I know men. It just doesn't feel right at all, and you have to roll an eye as well as, again, them throwing in made-up houses when we have some rather long lists of northern houses that they could just have used. And, they left out some significant named houses and throw in this Mason or Mason, whatever but it's okay, but it's showing more of these problems that they have with mashing the Jon and Sansa storylines together. And then we move on to Braavos, where Arya's storyline continues to actually move forward, not just having more training montages. Here she gets some of the backstory on the Faceless Men, and it more or less sticks to what we know from the books, so it's nice that they actually used that material and more or less stuck with it. And then we get what is a really interesting part of that they actually went with the whole play thing that we have from her Mercy chapter, from, as of yet unreleased, has just been seen as a preview. And it's interesting that they actually went full out and decided to put on this play, and it's quite a lot of fun, the way that they have I presume the actors are mostly supposed to be from somewhere on across the Narrow Sea rather than being Westerosi. Their take on the politics of Westeros, and having Arya in the audience watching as they turn Ned into this comedic and not particularly nice figure, and of course trying to star Cersei and Joffrey as the golden angels who do nothing wrong. So yeah, it's a good sequence for Braavos, and I think it's nice that they're finally getting some more meat into this story. And then, of course, after the play is done and Arya goes backstage, I guess they're really trying to even out that whole nudity quota, because holy cock close up, that was like, all of a sudden your screen is full of one penis with two warts on, That was quite a surprise, but well, that was fun, I guess. Then we hop back across the sea and back to Westeros and the Iron Islands. And where do I start? Because the King's Moot is incredibly underwhelming. First of all, they set it up so that it seems like, okay, it's mandatory with a King's Moot for some reason. That's what Yara gets informed of in the other episode. And then, of course, we just have Greyjoy claimants anyway, so it seems like to be some sort of internal procedure for selecting the next Greyjoy who's going to lead the Iron Islands. So Yara is up there telling them how she is going to build the biggest fleet the world has ever seen, and she should have asked Mance Rayder about how that whole thing, building the biggest fire the North has ever seen, how that worked out for him. Not so well, so maybe we should have stayed away from that phrasing. Unfortunately, it seems that Uncle Euron has had the same idea. He's also going to build that fleet. Actually, he says, you're wrong about that. I'm the one who's going to build the Iron Fleet. So the Iron Fleet doesn't exist, but the concept of it somehow exists and he's going to build it. The phrasing there is really peculiar, but these are just some of the minor problems with the scene. A bigger problem, thematically speaking, is that Euron waltzes in there, and when Yara says that she's going to, her first act as queen is going to be arrest him for the murder of Balon Greyjoy, he says, yeah, sure, I killed him, and you should thank me for it because he wasn't leading us anywhere. So kinslaying is now perfectly fine and dandy with the Ironborn, and the priest, who's apparently supposed to be Aeron Damphair, or Aeron anyway, has no problem with this. Whereas in the books, the kinslayer is accursed, and no accursed man will sit on, on the throne, the sea stone chair, the salt throne here on the show. So they've completely flip-flopped that, and the priests of the Drowned God have no problem with Euron announcing himself as a kinslayer and being proud of it. The whole way that Euron is presented continues to be quite underwhelming. I don't think he may be a good actor otherwise. I'm not really familiar with his work, but he's definitely not right for that sort of slightly malice-tinged flamboyance that Euron should be commanding, and it just doesn't come across well at all. And then, of course, they decide, okay, Euron gets elected. Yara and Theon sneak away and decide to make away with most of the existing fleet somehow. Never mind that ships on the Iron Islands have their individual captains who decide what happens to the ship. It's not like you can just go and say that they all belong to the Greyjoys and now we're taking them. So no, they sail away with a massive fleet. Euron is understandably pissed, and then tells people basically to go and build him a new fleet to cut down every tree they can see, which should be pretty quick considering that the Iron Islands have pretty much been deforested by shipbuilding already. So where he's going to get all these trees, I'm not entirely sure. But he's saying, yeah, let's do this and let's go murder my niece and my nephew. It's really dull. It's terribly bad, and what should have been a rousing movement in the Iron Island storyline it falls flat. I can't say that it is as bad as the Dornish storyline, because nothing is as bad as the Dornish storyline, but it's really not good at all either. And from that dreadful King's Moot, we move over to outside of Vaes Dothrak, where we get the sappiest scene ever on the show, when Dany has a little heart-to-heart with Jorah, and he reveals that he has grayscale, and she gets all teary-eyed and sad, and you have to send me away, he says, and starts moving away. And she's like, no, you can't go, your queen hasn't given you leave to go. I command you to find a cure. All right, I'll just get straight on that, says Jorah, and rides off somewhere. Seriously, what were they thinking? like, this is the great moment of the Dany and Jorah love story. He, confesses his love for her and everything, and it's just, it did not belong in this show. I don't know which show it could possibly have belonged in, but Dany is absolutely terrible, pitiful, and just hopeless. And I just cringed through the whole scene. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say about it, but I don't know where Jorah is going. I don't know where he's supposed to find this cure that his queen so graciously has commanded him to find. But I don't know who's gonna cure Dany of that behavior either, frankly, because that's more serious than grayscale. And we stay on the other side of the sea, and we move to Meereen, where we have, again, more plot movement rather than Tyrion funnies, and this is good. This has Tyrion getting the idea that they need to spread word of that Dany is, the savior, and she's the one who sorted out this fragile peace with the other cities. And he decides that they're going to use the Red Priests for this. So they have a little audience with the High Priestess of R'hllor, Kinvara, I believe they decided to name her. It's quite interesting watching her give her presentation. I think it's very clear that they told her to model the way she spoke and everything on Carice van Houten's Melisandre. Varys decides to be very suspicious of this. Obviously, we've had Melisandre saying that Stannis was the one who was promised, and look where that ended up, basically. Of course, he knows everything what happened to Stannis, and that Stannis is dead and all of that. That's, of course, very well known. And then she decides to scare him a bit by saying, she knows what happened when he was castrated, and, she knows what the voice from the flames said, and should she tell him who that voice belonged to and all. So it's a nice scene that kind of captures a bit more of the Red Priesthood, I guess. Not sure how, she doesn't really address anything about where Melisandre fits into the overall plans. Is she some sort of apostate that has gone off on her own, or is she just, as Kinvara says, mistaken? She's just an honest servant of the Lord who's made a mistake. But it's nice at least to see that Meereen has some actual meat rather than sort of stalemate or stalling and waiting for Dany to return. And I've saved the most dramatic and the best part of the episode, actually, for last, and that is Beyond the Wall. This is the Here Be Spoilers section. Because it starts off with the earlier section. We find out that, at least in the show mythology, and this is something that Elio and I recently put out a video on, the fact that it appears that the children made the White Walkers the others, and this is a theory we've subscribed to for quite a while, and it seems right to us. The precise details, I'll say that for the last section where I discuss how I think this relates to book storylines, but it plays out well, although I guess one might have perhaps expected a bit more sort of fallout and reaction from Bran when he learns that the children in fact made the others as a defense against the First Men. And then, of course, in the final section, when Bran has made the mistake of trying to reach back into the past himself and see more of his family in the past, he ends up getting in touch with and getting touched by the Night's King, and this apparently gives the Night's King a way of entering and passing the wards and reaching them even under the weirwood. So they have to flee, and Bran has to immediately take over the position as the Three-Eyed Raven. The actual action sequence, the whole fast, we've commented before on the whole fast whites. It gets a bit sort of schlocky horror movie over the whole thing. We've again got the children throwing fireballs, and the whole playing up of the action seems as silly as when they did it the first time. They also, move fairly quickly in getting rid of Summer all of a sudden. That's direwolf number 2 that they've killed this season, leaving just Ghost and the missing Nymeria. And obviously it's kind of silly, first of all, that he dies so easily, but obviously it's difficult to do the CGI and working with the wolves. And it seems that they really like getting rid of them because they are difficult to work into things. But still, it was sad to see just, you know, Summer leaping in and then all of a sudden he's dead. But the big thing, of course, is the reveal about Hodor. Apparently, me being a corruption of Hold the Door, something that was first speculated on the Westeros forums back in 2008. So it's been around for a while, and also in the Inside the Episode they do confirm again that this came from George, so at least that part of it is true. And you know, they play it well. The heroic sacrifice, which is sort of that he has no choice but to do, because Bran is essentially controlling him, and the idea that the young Hodor has been damaged by seeing his moment of, you know, terrifying death, it's quite tragic. And having the final images be of the young stable boy, you know, thrashing around on the ground and just saying this hold the door over and over again, and it just becomes Hodor, and he kind of passes out as Hodor dies. It was strong, absolutely. They did a good job with that. It's just there are bits and pieces of it that are weird, like this door in the weirwood. Where did that come from? Again, I'm gonna touch a little bit more on that in a bit. And the idea that the sacrifice is actually going to help Meera, who's dragging Bran along, to get away from these fast whites once they get through the door. So there are problems with it, and it's unfortunate that they can't manage to get things together when they have a strong sequence and get all the pieces, so you don't have to say, well, it's good, but these things don't make sense. And obviously they don't care about things that don't make sense, but still, it is a strong end sequence. I'm not going to say anything else about that. So the overall verdict for this episode, well, it is without a doubt the episode so far this season that I've actually liked the best. There are some sequences that I actually like, and there are several sequences that are perfectly fine. There are some that obviously that are not so fine, like the Kingsmouth and the Dany and Jorah scene. The wall attracted the eye rolls this time with the various things about, you know, Sansa and Jon and the made-up houses and Littlefinger's teleporting. So I think they got about 4 eye rolls in total for just the North. But then most of the other sequences actually escaped them. However, there was definitely a spin for the Iron Islands, and I think a little spin for Dany and Jorah as well, because that was just terrible. But for me, it is the strongest episode so far this season. It actually has some actual emotional impact on me. Probably because, you know, Hodor and that sacrifice, there are actually some of the characters that haven't been completely ruined by the show yet, so it actually still had an impact on me. Also, it has to be said that not actually having King's Landing in this episode made it better for me, because that, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the sections that they simply cannot salvage with the plot changes that they've made and with the character changes that they've made. But let's move on to the spoilers for this episode, because that's obviously the big part, and a big part to discuss, and trying to relate them to what we think will happen in the books. As I said, we've had a video out already with our long-time speculation on the others being made by the children. I think that the scenario that they present, that they made it because of them losing to the First Men. I think this is entirely right. I think this is how it's going to be, you know, what we're going to find out in the books as well, that they, at least a faction of the children, and it's possible that not all children were on board with it, but some of them decided that they needed an additional defense against the First Men, so they took First Men and they turned them against their kin by making them into these creatures, and presumably somewhere along the way they lost control over them. The idea that they make them with dragon glass is interesting. Obviously, we've seen that dragon glass breaks, the way it's phrased is that it breaks the spells that, seem to hold the ice creatures that are the others, or the White Walkers, together. Dragonglass, its Valyrian name is frozen fire, so the idea that frozen fire, sort of the contained fire, would counteract ice, and that it would have a magical property, that works on its own. But there could be another dimension to it, and that's the idea that sort of like what you use to create something can also be used to destroy it. So if the magic in Dragonglass and the frozen fire of Dragonglass can create the spells that create the ice creature, they can also undo the spells. So it's entirely possible that, as they show, Dragonglass did indeed play a part in creating the first others. And then it seems that they, at least the way they showed it on the show, when they take the babies from Craster's, they don't seem to need to use Dragonglass to spread the ice to a new member of the tribe. It's possible that this is the case, it's also possible that they have to sacrifice and resurrect them somehow and have them turned into ice that way. But that part seems pretty solid. The exact circumstances of how Bran is going to find out, if it's going to be him looking through a weirwood and seeing a ceremony at the weirwood, seems reasonable. And then, of course, we have the Hodor part, the sort of more present-day mystery. And this is a difficult one to sort out. The idea that Hodor means hold the door, yeah, I'm gonna buy that, 100%. No question about it. And I mean, they do more or less confirm it inside the episode. They don't actually touch on the children part, the children and the others, but they do touch on Hodor. They say that, the way they phrase it, it's hard to say whether they got the exact scenario or how much detail they got from George. And the exact scenario is difficult to pin down. First, if we look at the way that Hodor in the past is supposed to have experienced his own death and then been locked in this cycle of just saying Hodor, 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 is it because Bran was in the past somehow skin changed into Hodor? Oh, by the way, I do have to add a small eye roll there, I realize. They said warg into Hodor. Bad writers. Anyway, did he do this? Did he skin change into Hodor in the past to connect to Hodor in the future, and that caused this feedback loop? Maybe, it's possible. Does that mean he can affect the past? We're actually going to do a whole video on time and the past, the present, and the future, so I'm just going to touch a little bit on this here. I don't think he can change the past, is what I'm going to say here. I think that if he did this is something that he was always supposed to do. I think there are alternate possible explanations. I think that some have speculated that maybe Hodor was a dreamer as well, and one of Bran's visions of going towards, the heart of winter shows him, the corpses or the souls of past dreamers impaled on sort of defenses of the White Walkers. Could Hodor have been damaged that way by somehow getting in touch with them, or going, into seeing a glimpse of the future and seeing himself dying in this way? It's possible. Old Nan says that, when she says his name is actually Walder, and one day, he just started saying this word and that's what people called him. This dramatic scenario of him collapsing in the stable yard with people around him and sort of saying this phrase that they can't quite make out, which eventually turns into Hodor. It seems like if she knew that this was what happened, she would have mentioned it. So the idea that it happens somewhere more private, or maybe even when he's much younger and accidentally reaches into the future or something like that. It's hard to make out, but I think that there's something. I think the idea that he saw his own death and that traumatized him, that much I will buy. Precisely how that happened, I think we definitely have to wait for George here. And then the actual scenario of his death. Is there a door under the weirwood tree? Well, a back door is mentioned when they enter the warded entrance, but is it a literal back door? It's also supposed to be down some sort of shaft that they have to move down through, and the idea of Hodor actually getting down there if they're fleeing and then supposed to be holding this door as they get out. The logistics of it, I can't quite make those out, to be honest. There's also the problem of, as I pointed out with the video of them when they're fleeing, if he's supposed to be holding this door and there's Meera and Bran are supposed to be fleeing, how much time can he realistically buy them? Yes, the Whites are slow and shambling in the books. They're not fast. But is it still going to be enough for them to flee when they're out in the middle of nowhere beyond the wall? Could this door not be somewhere else where Bran has to make, Hodor sacrifice himself? Could it be perhaps, the black door through the wall, and he has to get Meera through there, and Bran might still be, because I'm still not convinced that Bran is leaving the weirwood. Could Bran still be in the weirwood and controlling Hodor over a distance and have to make the choice of sacrificing him as Meera has to get through to the wall and perhaps, get to Castle Black with information about, Jon being stuck in Ghost, and please don't burn the body, so that Bran can try and get his mind out of Ghost and back into the body again. This is just some of the speculations that I've had around this. It's possible that it is actually at the weirwood tree, but there are a lot of logistic problems with it, and I find it hard to say. I do think that the actual sacrifice and all of that, that's going to happen in some way. I think that it's going to be with Bran more aware of it. Here, we don't really get, it's Meera shouting, "Hold the door," to Hodor, for example. And it's not quite clear what Bran, who's still sort of stuck in the past and still a bit out of it, what is he actually doing? Because we only see the stable boy's eyes sort of rolling white and showing that Bran is taking over at the very last moment, and Hodor has still been doing things in the present. So I'm not quite sure the visual there, what they intended. I think that when we see it in Bran's chapter, as Bran is controlling Hodor, it's going to be much clearer precisely what happens. We'll have to wait. I think it's going to be in The Winds of Winter rather than in the last book. I think these two mysteries were some of the mysteries that George had hoped to reveal himself. And it is a little bit upsetting that they have been revealed now, but I think there's still enough questions about it, fortunately, left, that I'm still very curious about what happens, how does it happen, and so I'm glad that we didn't really get even more detail about it. But there's lots more to speculate about here, and as I said, I think we're going to spin this off into another video about prophecy and seeing the past, seeing the future, and all of that. So that will be the next video that you see from us, and if everything works out as it should during the week. And after that, I'll be back with episode 6, Blood of My Blood.